Well, we are in week 4 of our Lenten study, Make a Difference, Following Your Passion and Finding Your Place to Serve by James A. Harnish. I hope that so far this book has started to open your eyes and stir in your hearts the ways in which God might be calling you into something new, the way in which God is prodding you in your life to make a difference in the world. So if you have not yet read chapter 4, I would encourage you to go ahead and stop the video right now and then come back, because there are things that we're going to talk about that might help you out in your reflection as you're processing through how God might be speaking to your life. So go ahead and hit stop. Today, our chapter is called Go Together. And it starts off with this wonderful quote that really is a foundation for what we are going to talk about today. It's from this South African airport that is painted up on the wall, this African proverb, and it says this: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. This chapter was really about how we are better together as the body of Christ, that we are called to not walk on this journey alone, but to go together with others who love God and are looking for ways and to make a difference. And in our group, we talked a lot about the ways in which we have experienced community, the ways in which that community has been able to strengthen us, to come around us, and to support us, and also how those communities that we have been a part of have been able to challenge us, to maybe see something inside of us and to encourage us to enter into a new space or do something different than we never thought that we would do. So what about you? Where have you experienced community? That community of the body of Christ in some form or fashion that has really strengthened you, that has helped you along your journey, people who have come alongside you and helped you grow and supported you. And where have you experienced sometimes those communities challenging you to do something different, to go further, to be able to reach out in a different way? I think we all have been a part of those types of communities at some point in our lives. Those communities that have strengthened us and have nurtured us and have sent us forth. And we know that it is a lot more fun to do things together, right? One of the discussions we had this morning in our class was if you can be a Christian on your own. And so we had some discussion of, yes, you could be a Christian on your own. You can have faith in Jesus. You can read the scriptures on your own. You can pray on your own. But others were saying, no, you have to be in community, because it's through community that we learn and grow. And what we came down to and kind of decided was, you could be a Christian on your own, but why would you want to? Why would you want to? It's way more fun when you can do things as a community, when you can do things together. And not only is it more fun, but there's something about being in community that strengthens us, that helps us to move forward into places that we never thought we would go. We watched a video this morning together, and one of the speakers was sharing about communion and how over Passion Week, their church would go and live in small groups in the streets for that week in 24-hour sections. So one group would go out for 24 hours and live in the streets. They're in Nashville, and so living into that community of homelessness. And they had partners within that community who they had built relationships with over the years, who then took that group under their wings and helped them kind of understand what it was like to live out on the streets. But soon it became dinner time, and they didn't have any food. They didn't have anybody who was going to cook for them or bring them in a meal. They had to figure it out on their own, just like those who are living on the streets. And so as a group, they started to go out and look for food, to ask people if they would give them some of their leftovers or things that they could find that they could eat together, or maybe even getting some money that they could buy, something really cheap. And then everybody brought their findings back together as a group. a half-eaten pizza that somebody donated for them, a couple water bottles that they found, all these different pieces of food, and they shared it amidst their group. They shared it with one another. Here's half of a slice of pizza. Here's a bag of chips. Here's some water, and everybody took just a little bit for themselves. And this pastor was reflecting on how that was communion, sharing with one another those things that they had found and being able to live in this community and this experience together. And one of the powerful things that they said in this video was, where Christ's body is broken and blood is poured out right now in the world, that is where Jesus is. And so how do we go out and be a part of that and do the work that God has called us to do? How do we take our communion practice of remembering Jesus's body that is broken and the blood that was poured out? How do we remember that in a new way? Understanding that still happens, that bodies are broken, that blood is poured out, and that we're called to go out and to be Christ's hands and feet of love in the world and to do work in those places. They talked about how in our group, we talked about, gosh, that would be scary to go and to spend a night on the street, right? That would almost push us out of our comfort zones. But we remembered that moment did not start with them going out into the streets. That moment started when they started to go out onto the streets during the day and listen to stories. To be able to not just hand a sandwich to somebody who was homeless, but to actually engage with them, to share more than a sandwich, to actually share stories and to learn and listen about who they are and the pain that has brought them into this space. And then to be able to, have that story change those people. And as those stories changed them, they began to make these connections, form these relationships within that community that then allowed them to think about the ways God was calling them to experience even more, and then to be able to dream about how they could help. So it wasn't like they just went from one night sleeping in their own comfort of their beds and knowing that there's homeless people somewhere out there, and then the next night sleeping on the streets and trying to figure out this new world. It was these small steps that allowed them to begin to live into this calling that they had, to be able to listen to the stories, to be able to create connections. And there's no way that one of those people would want to go do that on their own. They went as a group because we're stronger together. When we are afraid, if we have somebody else with us, then we don't feel as afraid, right? When we are doing something, we don't feel as weak if we have somebody else with us because they give us strength. They give us courage. And so we are better together. And so then we begin to talk about, well, what is God calling us to do? What is the mission that God might be calling our family, our church family, or our small groups to be able to do? And how can we live into that? So we talked about our calling, right? A lot of times we get caught up in this trap of thinking that God is going to call us, like to speak right into our lives, and we're going to know exactly what we are supposed to do. We reflected on Moses and how Moses had this burning bush moment with God, right? Moses is walking along, kind of minding his own business, and boom, there is this burning bush there. And it is God speaking to Moses from this bush. It is an evident sign that God is speaking to Moses and calling Moses. And we often feel like we too should have a burning bush moment. And some of us will, but some of us won't. Some of us instead will be like Moses' brother Aaron, who gets invited to come by Moses. Doesn't have a burning bush moment of his own, but is called nonetheless to come and to journey with Moses through these 40 years that they are wandering in the desert, right? Is called to come and to be that support, to be that help, to also be that voice in his own gifts and his own way. And so sometimes we'll have those burning bush moments, but more often than not, we'll probably be like Aaron, who get brought along, who hear about how God is working in someone else's life and are stirred into that new space because we have a connection, because we are doing things together. We talked about in our group this morning about how it's kind of like the choir, right? The church choir here, and how everybody is invited to come and to sing. But not everybody feels like they have the gifts to be able to sing. I know that I am a lot better singer when I am singing next to someone who has a beautiful voice, like Krisha. When she is standing next to me, I feel like my voice is so good. But if I'm singing by myself, I feel like it might be like fingernails scratching on a chalkboard. But next to Krisha, I feel like my voice adds to it, right? And I'm better that way. And so there are people who in the choir have these lovely, beautiful gifts of song. When they sing, it inspires us. They sing almost effortlessly, and it's this beautiful music that they provide. And those people are like Moses. They have been called. They know that that is a gift that they have. But then there's others of us who join in the choir music because we like to sing, but maybe we don't feel as called with that gift. Maybe that's not our strongest place, but we want to add our voice to it. So when you add all these beautiful voices together, whether they're really awesome or whether they struggle like me, you have this beautiful melody that comes out and it speaks to people in a new way. That's what the church is like. The church is exactly like this beautiful choir where people have different gifts, different voices, but when they come together, when they add their song together, they make this beautiful melody that goes out into the world and fills the world with beauty and goodness. So as we think about going together, we know that we live in a society where people get along really well, and then there are places where people don't get along at all, right? And that has ratcheted up over the last years, where we feel like we can't even be around people who do not believe like us, think like us, have the same political beliefs as us, the same values as us. There's a lot of contention. But the blessing of this church community is that there are so many of us who have come into this space who have different beliefs, different political views, different values, different ways in which we experience God. And what we have found that is if we can put those aside, listen to each other's story, and know that our mission is to go and to make disciples for the transformation of our community, for the transformation of our world, then we can work together despite those differences. And in fact, we're better together with those differences because God knits us together in this beautiful collaboration, and we are better together. And we can be a true testament to others in our community and into the world about how John Wesley would use this quote, even though we do not think alike, we can still love alike. God calls us to come together to be the body of Christ, knitted and woven together so that we can make beauty into the world. So, my challenge for you is to think about the communities that you're involved in. Do you have a community, even a couple of people in which you can live out your faith, that you can go and you can make a difference in the world? Or are you in need of finding that space, finding some people to come alongside you, or maybe you coming alongside somebody else to make a difference in the world? And as you begin to think about those communities that you're involved in, or forming a community that you can be involved in, how can you then go together the extra mile? Not just that short distance, but that distance that lasts a lifetime of listening to God's call and to making a difference, not only in our local community, but also then in a broader sense, making this beautiful music and goodness into the world. We're better together, my friends. So even though we don't think alike, let us love alike. And let us surround each other and stir each other, support each other, strengthen each other, and challenge each other to go into the world and to make a lasting difference. We'll see you back next week. Don't forget those reflection questions at the end of the chapter and some of those ways in which we can engage this week. And we'll see you back here next week for chapter 5.